Hello Internet, I am the hero Julios, once again with another One Piece card game video. It's actually been a little bit since I've talked about it, but I have gotten my hands on a set of each of the starter decks from the Super Pre-Release event, and I figured I wanted to talk about all of them, but I didn't want to I didn't want to talk about all of them in individual videos because you're covering a lot of the exact same topics over time. So I'm going to start by showing you that all four starter decks have a leader card, which is completely necessary to play the game. They also have 4 Dawn decks, which is a compilation of 10 Dawn cards. They just say Dawn on them, but during your turn you can give a Dawn card to a character or your leader to give them an extra 1,000 power during your turn. This becomes super necessary for getting over your opponent, but also with Dawn cards being your mana resource, it causes you to have to pick and choose between how you want to use them. Dawn is reacted to differently by each of the leaders, though Crocodile and Kaido have roughly the same effect when it comes to how they use their Dawn. But the individual leaders are Luffy for the red starter deck, the Straw Hat starter deck, Eustace Kid for the green starter deck, the Worst Generation, Crocodile is the leader of the blue starter deck, the Warlords of the Sea, and Kaido is the leader of the purple starter deck, the Animal Kingdom Pirates deck, or the Beast Pirates depending on English or Japanese translation. I'm going to start off with the vanilla cards in the deck, vanilla being a term used colloquially to describe a card that has no real abilities. So for example, this Frankie card here, while he does have 6,000 power and he costs 4 to play, he doesn't do anything else. Now, a lot of cards in the One Piece card game have a counter on them, which will protect you during the counter phase. When a card goes to attack, you can choose to use X amount of counters from your hand in order to increase the power of the target. Then the target can be safe if you exceed the power of what's attacking it. Anyways, every deck has a 1 cost with 3,000 power, a 2 cost with 4,000 power, a 3 cost with 5,000 power, and a 4 cost with 6,000 power. You'll see throughout the card game that most cards, if they don't have any special abilities, they make up for it by having a lot of power in regards to their level. So, the 3 costs with 5,000 power, every leader in the game has 5,000 power, or at least until, some other booster packs come out. As it stands right now, Luffy, Kaido, Kid, and Crocodile all have 5,000 power, so being able to play on your second turn a 3 cost with the same ability to match means every time that character attacks, the leader, or the player with the leader I should say, has no choice but to use a counter if they don't want to take damage. To make it even more terrifying, the 4 costs with 6,000 power means that you're going to have to find a way to have 2,000 power to counter any attacks coming at you. They make up for their lack of special abilities with this increased power, and we'll see, especially in the blue and purple decks, that there are other cards that unify very well with them, making them even more terrifying. The next starter deck cards I wanted to point out are the 4 cards, 1 in each deck, that have a counter of 2,000 to them. So if you take a look at this Mihawk card, you'll see his counter is plus 2,000. Now, they do have great abilities. Like this Brook, he can give 2 of your Rested Dawn to a player or to one of your other character cards, effectively making him cost 0 because the 2 Dawn that you will spend to play him, you can then immediately give to another character to increase their power. So Brook is a good card to play. Same with Apu, Dracule Mihawk lets you draw 2, trash 2. Ulti, actually, goes very well with Page 1, this 4 cost 6,000 power that I just showed earlier, because her ability lets you take a Dawn from your play area, your cost area, and put it back into your Dawn deck to play him without paying his cost. So as early as turn 4, you could have a 5,000 and 6,000 power body on the board. The tricky part with these cards is debating whether or not to actually play them, because their 2,000 power can help you in a pinch. See, when you want to defend yourself from being countered, your opponent's going to count how many cards are in your hand. But if they're counting in the assumption that you only have 1,000 of a counter in hand, you have 2,000, they might miscalculate and fire with less power than they need to actually damage you. That's one thing I do like about this card game, is the fact that you don't always know everything on your opponent's board. Granted, I'm very bad at this game because of that. I like the Digimon card game where I actually know everything that's going on, but it's a give and take that I hope to learn and understand better, and these are cards that will certainly help with that. Speaking of not knowing what your opponent has, imagine your opponent or you yourself not knowing what you have. See, these character cards, while they are different in terms of what they can do, for example, Who's Who can KO a character with cost 3 or less, Boa Hancock is a blocker, these cards all have the trigger effect, play this card. So if you take a look at Killer here, all 4 of them have this same trigger, meaning that when you take damage and you take the card from your life pile and put it in your hand, you can then choose whether or not you want to use this ability. You can play mind games with your opponent by taking Who's Who, putting him in your hand, and choosing not to use his trigger. Then your opponent plays some 3-cost card and you can safely destroy it next turn. Or you can do the opposite and play him immediately to destroy something that was going to attack this turn. The trigger cards are very interesting because you yourself don't know whether or not you have them in your life stack. So it's a great card to have, but don't rely your entire strategy on them being in your life stack, because it's only a 5 in 50 chance of them actually being there. As it stands right now, there's no cards in the game that increase your life stack, so we'll have to, keep an ear, see if anything like that happens. But for now, yeah, these are great effects and fantastic ones to have actually played, but don't assume it's going to happen every game. I feel like these ones are pretty obvious, they go without saying, but I'll bring it up to the screen. This is Chopper. He's got a blocker ability. Both him, Capone, Trafalgar, and Black Maria all have this ability as well. Blockers, as the name implies, block attacks, and you're going to need to block as many attacks as you can to make sure that your opponent can't hit you to win the game. Now, they're not very strong, and all the starter decks except Red have other blockers that are more powerful, but these are good, 1, in Black Maria's case, 2-cost cards to just throw onto the board maybe early in the game or when your opponent least expects it, in order to keep one attack from getting through. Most of the time you're not going to survive the attacks that come, but if you are really hell-bent on keeping your blockers surviving, you can choose to block and then use counters to protect them. Next up are the event cards, in which all 4 starter decks have 3 event cards each. Now you can tell by looking that the event cards in the Straw Hat Crew, and especially in the Worst Generation deck, aren't very expensive compared to the 6-cost event card from the Animal Kingdom Pirates deck. But they fit very well with their individual strategies. In addition, all of the starter decks come with both event cards that do not have a counter and some that do. The example I'll have here is Scalpel, holding it up. It has a counter effect that lets your leader or character gain 2,000 power during a fight, then set one of your Dawn cards as active, which effectively makes it pay for itself. When countering using an event card, you have to pay the Dawn cost, which means you have to end your turn with enough Dawn to pay for that card. Now, your opponent may have ways of forcing you to, put some of your Dawn into a rested position, but for the most part, you are letting your opponent know that your hand is on a trigger, and it's up to them to decide whether or not they want you to pull it. While not in all of the starter decks, the red and purple starter decks have stage cards. A stage card is a card that will be played in your stage area and has an ongoing effect that you can activate once per turn. In the case of Onigashima, it allows you to take a card from your Dawn deck and add it to your area rested. The stage cards, personally, I kind of wish the green and blue ones had come with stage cards. I don't like when a starter deck for a card game is missing an entire mechanic, because, especially since these are the first starter decks, it's kind of important to make sure that anyone can buy any deck and understand the entire card game. So that's kind of my only gripe about the One Piece starter decks is I wish blue and green also had stage cards because I feel like that would be better off for anyone trying to get into the game. Finally, this is what most friends that I've talked to about the card game find very confusing about it. There are character cards based on each of the leader cards. So, you know, if you aren't familiar with the game, you might wonder why you have Luffy both in your hand and as your leader, or, you know, Eustace or Crocodile, you get the point. I actually kind of like it. It's a way of having the boss of the deck actually step out into battle themselves. Obviously, they are the epitome of what their decks are capable of. Crocodile can bounce cards back to your hand. Kid can unsuspend himself or active himself at the end of your turn. Kaido just decimates. He gets rid of 5 Dawn from your own play area, but he has 10,000 power and he can KO something and he can rush, whereas Luffy is as simplistic as the Rubber Man himself. He is a rush card who, when attacking, if he has 2 Dawn on him, he cannot be blocked. So he just like darts past the enemy and goes straight for the leader, just like Luffy does. So I know what you're thinking. Why did I want to take some time out of my day to talk about what the 4 starter decks have in common? Well, it's because I wanted to have an excuse to talk about the One Piece card game, and I really couldn't think of anything else that hasn't already been said by a different channel. So those are the similarities between the 4 starter decks. So keep in mind when determining what you want to do that there are mechanics that are similar across the board. If you're looking to just play with your favorite characters, I would say just pick whichever starter deck has those characters in it. If you're looking for a specific type of strategy, I would look up videos or, you know, some articles or something to see which starter decks based on what you like to play, how you like to play the game. So that's really all I wanted to do. I wanted to talk about the starter decks, talk about how they were similar in a way that hasn't already been talked about, and I just am really looking forward to this game. We are a month away, so let me know in the comments with the month away from this card game happening if you actually want me to talk into greater detail about these cards. Maybe I could do a deck analysis on each of the 4. I know which one I think is the best. I know which one I think is the worst. And, you know, if you guys are interested in hearing me talk about that, just give me a jingle and I will make that video. Thank you for watching as always, and I will see you in the next video. This is the Hero of Julios, Xing out.